time.
Wasn't gonna say time for what, but I won't. I'd like to call this special meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Donald Hewish,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tempore Margaret Morales.
Here,
Thank you. And can you please provide us with your password?
it's 22W 102.
Thank you. And what is your location?
Home?
Thank you. Is anyone else with you?
No.
Thank you. Councilmember Mitch Lindeman,
Present.
Councilmember Dania Acosta,
Present.
Councilmember Ray Shelton,
Present.
Councilmember Michael Valdenegro,
Present.
Councilmember Jose Grijalva,
Here.
City Manager Ana Urquijo,
Present.
City Attorney Dennis Fitzgibbons,
Here.
City Treasurer Luis Pedrosa.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 3, persons wishing to address the council in writing or verbally on any item not on the agenda. Do we have any requests this evening?
Not tonight. Mr.
Thank you. Item number 4, discussion decision on approvals. Item A, 4A. Discussion decision on second reading of ordinance number 23-1160, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the sale of a vacant parcel of land located on the north side of 11th Street, approximately 820 feet west of Pan American Avenue, with assessor's parcel number 409-06-020T to Cox Communications Arizona LLC pursuant to terms entered into by the parties and establishing severability of components of ordinance and establishing an effective date thereof. Mr. Kiko, please.
Thank you. Mayor, members of the council, this comes back to you for a second reading. This is the sale of the parcel to Cox Communications. As we heard in the first presentation, the business of Cox Communication plans to utilize this space to construct a hub to power its new fiber conversion currently underway in the city. We've noticed trucks in the community, projects are moving. Fiber to home and fiber to business as their major project is underway. And this parcel, as we understand, is going to facilitate expansion from their current footprint here in town. Where they're at on F Avenue just doesn't give them the space to expand, and this will be a nice positive addition to the community for the type of business that's coming in. Any questions we're able to address? Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the second reading?
Mayor,
Yes, Mrs. Acosta.
I move that mayor and council approve the second reading of ordinance number 23-1160 by number and title only.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Acosta, second by Mr. Shelton to approve the second reading of ordinance number 23-1160 by number and title only. Any questions or discussion? Did want to add, I'm glad Mr. Kiko did that. I don't know if you've seen these Cox vans out and around town, but they're here and they're starting, and so this is exciting times for that. Anyone else? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Lindeman,
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta,
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro,
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales,
Yes,
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, motion carries.
an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the sale of a vacant parcel of land located on the north side of 11th Street, approximately 820 feet west on American Avenue, with assessor's parcel number 409-06-020T to Cox Communications Arizona LLC, pursuant to terms entered into by the parties, establishing severability of components of ordinance and establishing an effective date thereof.
Thank you. Item number 4B, discussing decision on first reading of ordinance number 23-1161. An ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Arizona, Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the city manager to execute and deliver an installment loan agreement with Baystone Government Finance, a division of KS State Bank, for purposes of financing a wheel loader for the city of Douglas wastewater treatment plant, authorizing the taking of all other actions necessary to the consummation of the transactions and contemplated by this ordinance, establishing severability of components of ordinance and declaring an emergency. Wants to lead off? Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. What you have in front of you is an ordinance to approve a loan agreement with Baystone Government Finance for that wheel loader that was needed for the wastewater treatment plan. We are respectfully requesting that you do it at an emergency basis due to market volatility and rising interest rates. We would like to close on this as soon as it is possible. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. May I have a motion to the placement of the ordinance?
Mayor,
Mrs. Acosta, please.
I move that mayor and council approve the placement of ordinance number 23-1161 on its first reading by number and title only and declaring an emergency.
Is there a second? Second. Motion by Mrs. Acosta, second by Mr. Valdenegro to approve the placement of ordinance number 23-1161 on its first reading by number and title only and declaring an emergency. Any questions or comments?
Mayor.
Yes, please, Mrs. Acosta.
I'm just curious as to the, this piece of equipment, is this something that's being replaced or something that, I don't recall if it was in the budget or not. I'm not saying it wasn't, I just don't remember. if This was a budgeted item or, what the reason for the need to purchase right now.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Acosta, yes, we are replacing an older, non-working wheel loader, and it was budgeted. And it's in the, as it states, the loan payments were budgeted under the debt service for the sewer fund.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindeman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering if, like, what Mrs. Costa said, we had an existing one. Is there a trade-in for these type of things?
I'm sorry.
Is there a trade-in value for these types of things?
That I'm not sure about, Councilmember Lindeman. That would be a question for our folks at this sewer plant, unless Mr. Pedrosa has anything to add.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lindeman. Our understanding is that the existing wheel loader does not carry that much value. We were gonna continue using it at other sites instead of trading it in. So we are buying a new piece of equipment, and we were wanting to continue to use the existing for whatever we can use it for.
Okay, so it still is functioning. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Lindemann,
Yes,
Ramos,
Yes,
Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro,
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales, Mayor Pro Tempore Morales.
yes,
Thank you. Mr. Mayor,
Yes, motion carries.
an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the city manager to execute and deliver an installment loan agreement with Baystone Government Finance, the division of KS Statement, for purposes of financing a wheel loader for the city of Douglas wastewater treatment plant, authorizing the taking of all other actions necessary to the consummation of the transactions contemplated by this ordinance, establishing several legal components of ordinance and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the first reading?
Mayor,
Yes, Mrs. Costa.
I move that mayor and council approve the first reading of ordinance number 23-1161 and to place it on second reading by number and title only and declaring an emergency.
Is there a second? Second. Motion by Mrs. Costa, second by Mr. Baldanegro to approve the first reading of ordinance number 23-1161 and to place it on second reading by number and title only and declaring an emergency. Any questions or comments? What's the description of wheel loader?
A wheel loader?
Yes, what does that do?
I will defer to Mr. Pedrosa on that one. Or perhaps our city engineer.
The It's a tractor. We're, Mr. Valdenegro, Mayor. We are trying to move sludge with this tractor. It's got a bucket and we're moving sludge from one section of the wastewater treatment to another and also loading it into dump trucks to be able to be taken to the waste station.
So last year when we did the finance committee, we rented this, this one that we have there right now that's being utilized. So we're gonna purchase an additional. And the one that we
It's a,
supposedly purchased for 260, yes. I see, thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure it's not a backhoe or something else, so. My question is that if we financed 260,000 last year for the same type of vehicle, which was budgeted, and we leased one, we rented this one, or purchased it for 190, I used one for 190,000.
Mayor, Mr. Valdenegro, this is a new wheel loader that we have bought already and the loan proceeds will get us reimbursed for that. Last year, we did not buy a wheel loader. We had a very older model. This one has more capacity than the older model. We were limited in the type of work that can be done with that one. So we are upgrading and also getting new over that. So
So my question is, that the one that we have at the plant right now, is that gonna be returned or is it gonna stay here?
it's going to stay with the city to be utilized amongst other departments that may need that piece of equipment. But certainly the wastewater division needs that to handle the waste transferring, like I mentioned, from one point to another.
My understanding is that wastewater would like, or the water department would like a backhoe. Something that can reach the depth of 10 to 12 feet. In the alleyways, I don't know if this is by far the best thing that we could purchase, if we still have the one that wastewater that's doing the job effectively right now. Maybe we should purchase the backhoe. Or a large backhoe with wastewater to also benefit.
Mayor, Mr. Valdenegro, we also, this fiscal year, we purchased a new backhoe for the water department as well. I'm not sure if they may be in need for another one as well, but we purchased one and one for the streets division as well.
I might add to remind people that this was part of the budget process and that's why it's approved and that's why staff is moving it forward to be able to purchase these things. To do that, of course, the budget process for next year is coming up in the next couple months, next month starts. So if the needs are there, I'm sure they'll be presented by staff to be able to handle that. But
Mayor,
my
Mr.
understanding
Mayor.
is that it also, the old one will use it until it's no longer economically feasible for repairs and such, and at which time we'll probably put it up for auction.
And I would also add that it's really critical to separate. Sometimes you can't share equipment because water needs a very clean piece of equipment to handle, any lines around potable water versus sewer that handles, other lines that are not so clean as you might imagine. So sometimes we can share these pieces of equipment. Sometimes we just cannot, but there's certainly ways to work around those things. We can certainly clean up after ourselves and decontaminate, but it just creates a whole set of issues along that. So just wanted to add that to context.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions, Ms. Valderino? Do you have anything else?
I just want to know what the size differential is from the one that's there already right now to the new one? Cubic feet, whatever it is. Do we have those numbers?
We do not, at least, we will have to get back to you on that one, Mr. President. Do not have those sizes.
Other than it's bigger.
Oh,
Yeah. Anyone else? Thank you. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro,
yes.
Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta,
Yes.
Councilmember Lindemann,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales,
yes,
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, motion carries.
members of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the city manager to execute and deliver an installment loan agreement with Baystone Government Finance, a division of AS State Bank for purposes of financing a wheel loader for the city of Douglas wastewater treatment plant, authorizing the taking of all other actions necessary to the consummation of the transactions contemplated by this ordinance, establishing several legal components of ordinance and establishing several legal components of ordinance and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the second reading? of the
Mr.
ord-
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Shelton.
I move that the mayor and council approve the second reading of ordinance number 1161 by number and title only and declaring it an emergency.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Shelton, second by Mrs. Costa to approve the second reading of ordinance number, 23-1161 by number and title only and declaring an emergency. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Lindemann,
Yes.
Councilmember Acosta,
Yes.
Councilmember Shelton,
Yes.
Councilmember Valdenegro,
Yes.
Councilmember Grijalva,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Morales,
yes,
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, motion carries.
in ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Douglas, Cochise County, Arizona, authorizing the city manager to execute and deliver an installment loan agreement with Baystone Government Finance, a division of AS State Bank for purposes of financing a wheel loader for the city of Douglas wastewater treatment plant, authorizing the taking of all other actions necessary to the consummation of the transactions contemplated by this ordinance, establishing several data components of ordinance and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Item number C, presentation, discussion on zoning code text and map amendments. Who wants to lead off?
I can lead off,
Please.
Mayor, members of the council. We have staff from our wrong page. Development Services Division here to go over some planning and zoning changes that are in process that we want you to have sufficient time to consider what's coming ahead. We did go to Planning and Zoning Commission yesterday to initiate the process. We're not completely ready to have them vote on these items because they're taking their time to go through the large packet as well. So we wanted to give you all enough lead time to properly understand also the concept. So Mr. Osborne will go over the packets that are in before also the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we will come back to you as soon as we're able to with the direction for how we handle these based on how Planning and Zoning recommends, the commission recommends and votes on it. So we're hoping he'll go over also the timelines on what we're hoping to accomplish, and you may see some other things coming through separately, if that's more efficient for certain things that we have pending already with pending construction or building permits that are waiting for some of these changes. So there's lots of things going on, and Mr. Osborne will take it away and have you start going through this very lengthy packet.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Osborne, Mr. Keel, start off with, Again, there's a lot of information here, council, and don't, please try not to feel overwhelmed at once because it is quite overwhelming. But we also asked staff to prioritize so that we don't have to take a big chunk of it at once, that there will be projects, like Mr. Hugo said, that are pending. People wanting to construct on these properties, they will be coming up first. And do that, and staff will keep us informed on which ones those are, so we can make sure we're up to speed and doing all that. And Mr. Osborne, you've been very busy, obviously. So, appreciate that, and take us for a walk.
Okay, it might be a little bit of a run, but we will go through these fairly quickly. The first is the East Side Addition Block 12 Zoning Districts Map Amendment, privately proposed by Encarnacion Baez. For property that's located across from the Food City Shopping Center. Let me see if I can get this. And so there's 10 parcels. As we had received application last year, I believe it was in July, for a rezone proposal to single-family residential 8 units per acre. Staff had a conditional approval. Though we were looking to see more intensity of development actually in an area where we have that shopping center that's so critical to our community. There's been redevelopment of parcels for residential use, even though that's not allowed by our zoning code for limited commercial zoning. But we also have need for housing in Douglas. And so in short, this is the properties are highlighted in heavy dark lines. Those are the parcels that were involved. The existing zoning is limited commercial, the proposal. This is some site images for all the parcels that were involved with that and are involved in this proposal. And they're proposing for multifamily residential zoning, which is consistent with other zoning in the area. Also helps achieve density for housing. Number of housing units would be increased. And so that's something that I think from staff's perspective is a positive. It is an area that was designated in the general plan as a community services node. And as was discussed before with the Planning and Zoning Commission, is that this commercial or community services node was intended to have mixed use, to be pedestrian oriented, to have more intensity of use. And even a zoning district was supposed to be created, but never was. But multifamily residential gets us more of what we want. And so there are a number of policies that were discussed in the initial go round. We were able to summarize those. They're pretty much the same policies that were considered in this process. But since the general plan has this area as a community services node, we were really looking to also look at other zoning districts in the area that are zone commercial and how those are challenged. And that's why we have these other proposals for code amendments. First, to amend our code to allow for more intensity of use just in the regulations, and then to specifically identify those properties. But this is really sort of the linchpin right here, is this proposal, which got the conversation started. And so staff recommended approval, but we also had to make note that the notification requirements of 300-foot radius is in statute, even though it's not in our development code. And so we're looking at having to have the applicant or ourselves actually provide certified mailings to properties that are 300 feet from the 10 parcels that are involved. The application was submitted with petitions as required. And so we felt comfortable moving forward with it, but our legal counsel gave us some guidance from statute. And so I'd be happy to take any questions you might have on this one before moving on to the next.
Mr. Osborne, just for clarity purpose, on the bullets lettered in the background for their item, are they in the different order than what your slides are?
That very well could be. We tried to go for brevity with with other presentations. This one was a presentation that was actually based largely on the one that was given in July, and there weren't any significant differences. It's just that the applicant wished to go for a multifamily residential zoning district because they could.
Okay, I believe that if you're following on the agenda item versus the packet, I believe what he just went over, if I tracked it correctly, was letter H and letter A perhaps.
Okay.
But just so I can go through and kind of cross those off.
Does that
No
make sense?
problem.
Everybody? So it's item H, okay. And also, again, don't feel obligated that, oh, this is my only chance to ask a question. No, you'll have many more opportunities to ask
Right.
questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So are we ready to move on to the next? Okay, the administrative codes amendment. And this is administrative codes because we were looking at several articles in the zoning code that refer to responsibilities, roles, and authorities. Those have changed with the changing of our organization. The building inspector really is not the officer who should be the zoning code compliance person or for interpreting the zoning code. So we changed that. But we also provided some expansion of administrative authority for staff and also for clarity in the process and the requirements and for the decision-making process, also the clarity. And to have the opportunity for appeals and having that language also clearly spelled out. And so we also proposed to add language to allow for minor conditional use permits and minor variances as administrative processes on application submittal. There are thresholds that are placed into this proposal that would allow staff to determine if something would need to go to a public hearing of the Planning and Zoning Commission or to the Board of Adjustment for conditional use permits or for variances. Appeals would go first to the city manager in many cases, and then to the Board of Adjustment, and then on to court if the decisions that were being provided administratively were not to the satisfaction of a client. Parcel splits, combinations, and lot line adjustments, regulations for those would be spelled out, and that's in the packet as well. Home occupations expanded to allow for detached structures and for interpretation on uses. Because we have a number of home occupations that have been historically in a garage, a former garage or a former storage barn or something like that. And as opportunities for people to retire, they want to also have a side gig, maybe in something they used to do regularly, is to provide the opportunity for approvals on those. And again, administratively, staff changes in terms of roles and responsibilities, that's being recognized. The plan review process is being made clearer. And also building permit and inspection fees section is also reorganized for clarity. Staff is going to be taking on more of looking at the building code that we've adopted, the 2006 code and its fee schedules. And the way that it calculates building valuation or project valuation. And simply doing those calculations through our permitting process and then going on to what the fees would be. Right now, that section of code in it's in Title 15, actually has it a bit backwards. It has the project valuation calculations after the building permit fees and plan review fees. But that's the short of that.
I think, Mr. Osborne, just for clarification, that's all within allowable guidelines and laws from Arizona revised statutes such that this fits in.
We believe so, but our legal counsel is going to also be taking time over the next several weeks prior to the next public hearing to consider that. And so they may actually propose some revisions to that, but our intent has been to recognize who we actually have on staff and also to provide for more administrative authority, which is something that, we've been asked to do. We've been asked, fairly regularly for variances or conditional use permits when some of the issues are very perhaps minor. And we've had to go for a public hearing, staff reports, presentations, and everything else. And we're finding that we're very limited on time for doing those things.
And again, the motivation of this is these issues have come up And we're looking at, continue to be business friendly and building friendly, and
Yeah.
that's why we.
And to
we
resolve,
hopefully can streamline some of these things to be able to assist in that.
because typically, a city planner would have administrative interpretation authority. And it could be appealable, if a decision of the city planner, isn't to the satisfaction of someone, they could appeal. And the city manager would be their first step. Documentation and certification of the decision is all part of the process, whether it's the city planner, the city manager, or the Board of Adjustment. Making those decisions, they would be part of a record that could then be referenced for future, for future use.
Mayor,
Yes, please, Mr. Enderman.
I think along with that, somehow the city council itself should be in there before you get to the courts.
I would say that as a legislative body, there might be some issues with that, and there may be a reason why the Board of Adjustment was sort of set in that role, as it's typically a quasi judicial body that has to have findings of fact as part of its decision. The city council, being a legislative body, doesn't necessarily have to have that. But if that's something of interest, we could check with our legal counsel and see if they, see where they would land with that.
In my experience, the Board of Adjustments is very limited on what they can do, and in the old days, I understood it was by statute, there were only 4 reasons that you could go through the Board of Adjustments and no one could ever make them. So anything that goes before the Board of Adjustments would be denied. And I think that's wrong. Now, I could be wrong on that, but that's what I'm remembering.
Right, and that's the thing too, is that we, in looking back, if we'd had even more time to prepare for the administrative codes text amendment, we probably would have suggested some changes to Title 12, or rather Article 12 of the zoning code and Article 11. The Board of Adjustment in Article 11 and amendments in Article 12. Because what we found is that the notification requirements that the state has drive some of our requirements, but they're not, we've actually gone beyond what the state requires with certified mail, for instance, with the city taking on that responsibility, which isn't identified in statute. We have also required petitioning for zoning district map amendments, where that's not a state requirement, but that's what our requirement is. And I'll just say that petitioning for all of the properties that are designated in the mixed use infill development overlay zoning district, that's going to probably be close to, maybe close to 1,000 parcels that we'll have to collect petitions for. And it's just to change the regulations to make them more friendly, make them easier to actually be redeveloped, and that all parcels within the mixed use infill development overlay zoning district, it would be applicable for all of them. Right now, we restrict that. But I'll get to that in a moment.
Mr. Kegel, could you ask our legal staff about
Absolutely.
Mr. Enderman's request? And then that would be a policy issue, whether or not we as a body would want to take that on. So be thinking of that also.
We will insert that. Mr. Mayor, I would like to also add that many of these items that Mr. Osborne is going through are also basic housekeeping, clarity. We've gone through so many situations where our customers just get very confused with the fee schedules and the way they're set up. Is it valuation or isn't it valuation? And so we're correcting that based on the spirit and intent of what is already codified, but trying to provide clear tables. And so much of this is housekeeping. There's so much, but I just wanted to state that a lot is housekeeping for that
Right.
purpose.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta.
I just want
please.
to make sure that we're not setting up any roadblocks.
Right.
And for the benefit of the property owner or the user and things like, let me relay a quick story.
Please.
When I was back in the 90s, when I was chairman of the PNZ, there was an issue with a developer that was against the rules. And so we voted no. Well, at that time, the city council overrode us and they developed it anyway. So that's why I'm wondering, where do the piecemeals come together nowadays?
Good point. Mrs. Acosta, please.
Yes, so just. It just sparks the question, because there has been. Recent. Issues with some, parcels that have been developed. That went back to saying, a previous city manager approved it. So where does that discretion lie, and how can we make sure that, everything, is transparent and fair in that, there's no either, personal favors or, done for one person but not the next, and that there's that, obviously we didn't have, I think the proper communication or documentation of a previous city manager allowing, something outside of the code. So, how do we prevent that? And does this actually create maybe a little bit more issues than what I just explained?
Right now, there really isn't any process or substantive requirements for decision-making. It's kind of a little bit stunning to me for administrative decisions. There are some things that are spelled out in terms of this is what you need to submit, but some of those things are also a bit outdated.
Okay.
Like we're moving to digital. Digital is where we want to be, the smart cities,
Yeah.
movement, all this. And for us to be able to focus on our work and be efficient about it, we need to move in that direction. But for decision-making, that is being placed into this, I think it's called Resolution of Disputes section in Article 3 of the zoning code, general provisions, section 30, I think it's 302. 302. We're amending that to become administrative interpretations. And I think there's a little bit more to it than that, but we spell out, these are the application requirements. So it's not just going to be walk into City Hall and say, I want my money and I want it now. It's like, no, there's a process you have to follow. You have to file an application because we need to have a record, and we need to create a record with documentation of our deliberation and what we've considered, what we've been asked to consider, and ultimately what our interpretation is. And if there's an appeal of that, there's an appeal application that would need to be filed, and the city manager could then follow through with that part of the process. But we want documentation. We want there to be a connection with the development regulations that are creating a challenge for which there's relief being sought. But a lot of that, when it becomes site specific, if it's a site specific question, that's not going to be an administrative interpretation. That would be still going through the variance request or the conditional use permit application process. But the thresholds that have been put in to section, I believe it's 310 of the zoning code or conditional use permits, there's administrative review, like like the initial review. And if staff can determine that this use that's being requested is basically consistent with the zoning district that is there, then we could go through a minor conditional use permit process that would be administrative, not going out to public hearing, not going to a newspaper publication and following that schedule. And same thing for variance requests, where we establish thresholds. 25% is what we're putting out there for consideration, where somebody only has, let's say, 8 feet for a setback from the side property line, where the requirement is 10 feet, they could get an administrative variance. They could apply for that, and that's would be an administrative decision. Again, appealable to the city manager if staff also felt that because of possibly a use issue, that the variance request should still go to the Board of Adjustment. Staff could also make that determination. So it's not that the Board of Adjustment or the Planning and Zoning Commission become irrelevant. The thresholds are such that a lot of projects will probably still go to those boards, the board and the commission, but we at least have a role where we might be able to resolve some of the smaller issues administratively. But that's, we want to provide that. We want to make sure that we're documenting throughout the process. So it's really clearly understood that this is the decision that was made. And this may be the appeal decision made, and then the next, and so forth.
Right, okay. And it's just growing pains, I guess, because if we've never had this before, you're gonna have people that might want to circumvent the
There's-
rules and to say, well, I know the city manager, or I know so-and-so, and,
Right.
you know,
And there's
try to
actually-
skirt around
Mhm.
these, and that's what I'm thinking, you know, how can we try to avoid that? Thank
Yeah,
you, I mean, that you gave a pretty,
well, and
good
that's,
explanation.
I want to bring this to the attention of the mayor and council too, is that section 305 is also addressed, which does talk about special privilege and other things like that. So we want to make sure that it's really clear that our processes aren't favoring that kind of outcome. We're really looking for folks to be part of a public process that's part of a record where we can make decisions. And if they don't like those decisions, they can appeal.
Sure.
And we have a record. Also with the Historic Preservation Overlay District, what we've been finding is that there are a lot of projects that are stifled as well there because they have to go to design review for basically any improvement. It may say in there that, hey, you know, minor improvements could be administratively approved, but we don't have any definition until now with this proposal as to what that means.
Okay.
And so we've provided that as part of the amendment as well, so that not every project, not every improvement will have to go to the design review board again in public hearing with notification and all of that.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Please continue.
Okay, we'll move on to the next. The mixed use infill development MUI overlay zoning district code text amendment. The briefest thing I can say about this particular proposal is to remove the restrictions on existing properties that meet the zoning code requirements for minimum lot size. Right now, the only parcels that qualify for infill are substandard parcels that were created prior to 1966. So what staff is proposing is that infill development and mixed use development, where appropriate for the underlying zoning, it shouldn't be restricted for only the parcels that are substandard. We want also for properties that are present, created after 1966 to also have this opportunity. We would also be allowing for multiple detached residences, which right now all of any multifamily could only be located at corners, but also has to be attached. We're looking to provide opportunities for infill where there might be a mother-in-law cottage or, some other sort of a tiny house on the back of the property. But we're also looking at possibly allowing for application for parcel split approvals and having a process that we are putting into Article 3. They would have that ability to apply for down to a 3,000 square foot lot minimum. We've already had properties that have gone to recording that are of that size without city approval. Mixed use would be allowed in any existing colonia housing with a corner building. In the MUI, we have a number of these buildings throughout the city that had historically little corner markets. We want to allow those to be conforming. Triplexes would be allowed at corner lots as well. And design review is amended or would be amended to focus on what I call a self-mirror standard. That new buildings or remodeling would need to match the existing primary building on the application site. We have reference right now to design guidelines that nobody has been able to produce for my review and use. Notification for projects would be made the responsibility of applicants. Proof required as part of building permit application submittal. It says that they have to reach out to abutting property owners or right now it says notification to abutting property owners. One of the reasons why we're suggesting that the responsibility of the applicants is that in a pre-application process and a pre-application review, they would be reaching out to their neighboring property owners to let them know what they intend to do, what they would like to do. And they can talk about any of the issues and hash those out in their design before we even get to the building permit process. Okay, and again, this is really just basically to say that all the properties that are in the MUI should be available to enjoy the regulations of that overlay. But the challenge for us is going to be on this one, because we're changing the regulations by statute, and this is something that isn't in our code either, but it's in statute. Is that if we're changing uses or we're changing intensities, or changing number of floors or levels, is that we have to provide notification to all the property owners who would be affected. Even if it's a positive thing, we'd have to provide notification. And so it would be by our code, the notification is by certified mail, and that could be very expensive. The statute requires first class mail. So this may be, again, something that we might consider as maybe bringing forward as a revision to our proposal, is to include Article 12 of the zoning code for notification, to change that out to first class mail, because that's a huge challenge for whether it's a private property owner or for the city to do that. And also to possibly remove petitioning, because requiring petitioning, again, we are not looking at doing that for the mixed use infill development overlay zone. The boundaries aren't going to change for that. But for our next proposal that we're bringing forward, it's going to be very significant, but not 800 parcels, but a good number of parcels that will have to have petitions signed.
Thank you. Any questions on this? Please proceed.
The Innovative Community Overlay Zoning District Code Amendment to create the innovative community overlays. Right now, this would be after the this would be in section 516 created to basically for these purposes, to allow for existing residential, commercial, and mixed-use development properties to be considered legal conforming, to allow a variety of new housing types, especially in the IC residential overlay, and to some extent in the mixed-use overlay that's in the IC. It would allow for multiple detached residences and or limited detached accessory commercial, just as with the MUI. And with these overlays, it would allow for application for parcel split approvals to create minimum 3,000 square foot lots with a minimum of 25-foot street frontage. The IC residential setbacks at front and side are 4 feet, but 5 feet from any other structures on or off site. So it still allows for more intensity of use. The ICC and the ICMU overlay setbacks are 0 feet from property lines, but 5 feet from any structures on or off site. And the rear setback would be 0 feet with an alley present, 5 feet without, again, similar to the MUI overlay. Off-street parking requirements like the MUI would be relaxed because some of these properties, they don't have enough land in their parcels to even provide off-street parking. And that's a challenge for redevelopment opportunity or reuse. Allow for adaptive reuse in the ICC and the ICMU overlays. We have to acknowledge that the International Building Codes, engineering standard, and federal regulations like FEMA, state health laws would still apply. Notification for projects would be made the responsibility of applicants, with proof required as part of building permit application submittal. Again, these properties, these folks are going to be neighbors, and they'll want to be talking to each other about what they need and what they would like to do.
Thank you. Ms. Acosta?
Yes, I just have a quick question. Does, for these smaller lots, is there a restriction, or are they allowed to build stories to maximize the use of their?
I believe that 2 stories is the limit that's put into the regulations. And the requirement also, this is something also for the MUI, but also for these overlays, where there's mixed use allowed, it would allow for the mixed use to not just be part of the same building. It could be a detached cottage, or it could be ground floor or upper floor. It's not basically saying this is how your project is exactly going to be. We're providing some flexibility with that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please proceed.
Okay. And so we have a package that we proposed of innovative community overlays, actually locating in sequence, we would adopt the code. We would have an ordinance to adopt the code amendment for allowing the innovative community overlays. And then we propose these map amendments to actually activate those codes. And the locations we had for them, we have 7 proposals. The first that we were considering is the largest, and it's basically summarized as being the overlock addition proposal, but there are a number of other additions that are located within. We're looking at allowing for innovative community mixed use along A Avenue. It's not going to really show here, but to the left side of the page, the orange color, we have a significant number of commercial properties that are there, but their zoning is mobile home residence. They're basically located where they can't do anything with their property that isn't putting a mobile home on it. And that's true for all the mobile home residence zone properties. And what we found is that we only have 3 permits in the last 12, 13 years for mobile home locations into this area. Actually, no, I'm sorry, citywide. In the mobile home residence zone, we've only had 3 new locations permitted in the city. What we have found is that there are a significant number of single-family residential properties. Many of them are historic and old, probably going back early, even up to the 20s. But there's also been some new construction. And by our legal counsel's interpretation, and staff concurs, is that the code basically says you have to have a mobile home residence. That's what a single-family dwelling is in this zoning district. And so we're proposing a change, not to take away the ability for somebody to locate a mobile home in this area in the future if they can get it in there, but to allow for innovative residential, to allow for container homes, to allow for tiny homes, to allow for multifamily, to allow for single-family residential conventional development. And to make it something that would be as of right, but also to have the reduced setback requirements available if somebody wanted to do an innovative project, because there are some significantly smaller than code properties in this area. And again, this is be another area where we would allow for smaller parcels if split with city approval. And this is also an area where we have a number of proposals that are, as city manager has said, are on our plate for consideration, but at present they're not allowed. And so we may see a rezone proposal sooner than we can get the 359 petitions back for this area, because there's 359 parcels. But we'll see. The next one we put up for consideration is the North A Avenue Innovative Community Commercial Overlay. This recognizes that A Avenue has a significant number of properties, zone commercial, general commercial. But the setback requirements of our general commercial zoning district would require almost every one of these properties that's in the light blue. Most all of these properties would have to go for a variance. Almost every one of them has to go to a variance, and they have to go to the Board of Adjustment to do that. Very, very cumbersome. And so what we proposed was to have this overlay so that it recognizes that existing development that's on these properties is legal conforming. So they could acquire permits for doing minor things, that they could build closer to the sidewalk, and that wouldn't be a problem in the overlay. We have had a number of approaches from folks about redeveloping properties in here, including the extended stay Douglas motel property, but they've all balked because of 40-foot setback requirement in the zoning district. Some of these properties aren't even 40 feet deep. It's kind of mind-blowing, but we're looking at an historic commercial area of Douglas, and we're wanting to bring the regulations more into tune with that and with the surrounding neighborhoods, still wanting to see walkable development. And these proposals are seeking to do that. And this map contains the remainder of what's in your packet. A number of smaller commercial zoning districts exist. Several of them apply to residential properties, whether single family or multifamily. Multifamily or single family are not allowed by right in a commercial zoning district. And so these overlays that are proposed for these areas would allow for what is already there to continue as legal conforming and provide the opportunity that if the change is real and people want to see the properties change to different commercial, they're not losing it. They're not losing their limited commercial zoning if they want to and could someday do a strip mall development. But in the meantime, if they have residential use, they could actually keep that residential use and look at how they might be able to infill with commercial development. It may have the scale of home occupation, or they may redevelop their property to something else that allows mixed use, whether it's vertical, going up 2 floors, or 2 different buildings on the property. Parking requirements relaxed, looking especially at the property around the old Alco Theater, which is currently zoned multifamily residential, which doesn't allow commercial, wouldn't even allow the existing theater to continue its use or to resume its use. And so this proposal would allow for the Alco Theater to be restored if somebody wished to do that. Or they could do something mixed use in the property. They could do residential and theater. You know, why limit them? The building code, the fire code, they may have something to say about that, but from a planning and zoning perspective, we don't want to keep the chains on them. Property located to the north, near along San Antonio, but near 15th. We're looking at duplexes or triplexes that are zone limited commercial. So again, non-conforming today. They can't get anything done through planning and zoning without not even a variance request because of their multifamily. This overlay, the mixed use overlay, would allow them to continue as legal conforming. And if they wanted to change to something else, they have opportunities. There is a city property that's a triangle shape off of my eyes fail me. Come on. This is right off of right over by, I believe it's the elementary school, I think, or
It's just across the parking lot from the high school.
or across from the high school.
It's right there.
And so it's a triangle parking lot. The setback requirements, even for the limited commercial zone, are the same as the general commercial zone and would basically leave you with, as on many of these properties, you'd have a photo booth, like a photo hut or a water kiosk is all you could build there. And so this opportunity would allow for infill development that could actually, I think on this property, we could see something that might, actually go 0 lot line all the way around, or might have a 5-foot setback on one of the sides. But it could also be a gas station. Again, meeting other regulations.
Mr. Ren,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that brings up, I thought in past years, that triangle was given to the city across from the
Shows.
Mhm. Oh, okay.
It does show in the county assessor's data as belonging to the city of
Okay.
Douglas.
Yeah, thank you.
But this is not the reason why we pursued that. This is simply, it's like, well, this is an outlier, but it's right across from the school. It seems like there might be some opportunity for redevelopment of that property. And lastly, I believe it's called the Country Club addition. That one is currently zoned general commercial. I believe it has kind of a metal shop, almost like I would call it a ferreteria. But we're located right across from the high school, right across from residential, placing a mixed use, an innovative community mixed use overlay on that would allow for redevelopment that might be more consistent with the idea of having residences and, street level commercial, whether it's cafe or, candy store or whatever, right across from the high school so that the kids have a place that they might be able to go for lunch or after school. And the last one is the Musgrave mixed use overlay. That one's zone limited commercial. It's currently all in either vacant or residential use, residential single family. So again, not to bust the intent that may have been put into place when it was started, but it's clear that it hasn't been an effective zoning district to actually make change happen. And so this overlay will allow something to change if the desire is there. But we will have to provide petitions to all of these properties. 70% for each of these areas. And so these are considered separately and ordinances would have to be passed separately for each of them. But we would be looking at 70% as a threshold of approvals by property owners to actually be able to even consider that. That was, again, kind of shocking. It's kind of like, this is the barrier to entry for us from a planning and zoning perspective as a city authority, is that we actually have to vet to even propose this. And so that is in statute. But the petition part isn't. Notification is, but the petitioning part isn't. So we may want to, again, as part of our administrative codes amendment, is to suggest some revisions of that to remove those barriers.
Thank you, Mr. Husband. Mrs. Costa?
I would like to see that, that amendment to these petitions, if it's not, something that is required by statute. I mean, it really ties up, our staff to be able to enact these, zoning code changes that make sense to make,
Even to propose
Thank
them.
you.
right, even to propose them.
Got that? Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor,
Yes, please, Mr. Lindeman.
I just want to say thank you to Mr. Osborne for tackling this gorilla. And it's something that we really needed to do all these years, and I appreciate you doing that.
You're very welcome, all of you. Again, the idea here with these amendments is to try to get them all through as expeditiously as possible, because all of them have impact on what we're going to be able to do.
Exactly. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, where can I put a tiny home in Douglas? And we even got asked the other day, where do I put a tiny home? And that's when we got, we do. And so
Yeah.
this allows us to be able to plan for that and be able to allow it in certain areas.
Container homes.
Thank you.
We've got a lot of containers around here.
Again, notification of neighbors
Sorry,
required.
coming off the wall.
Mayor?
Very much.
Mayor, if I may also, we
Please.
have made copies of Mr. Osborne's PowerPoint to help you along as you go back and study the red line changes, that you can go through his very fine points made for each of those categories. So we'll get those to you before you leave today.
And of course, I'm always available for questions offline. So if you want, you can send me an email and ask for clarification. I'd be happy to do that. Provide that to you.
Great, thank you very much. Item number 5, adjournment. May I have a motion?
I make a motion.
Nobody wants to leave. Okay, let's talk some more.
Wait for
Mr. Shelton. Mr. Shelton, please.
Where's Marvin?
I can't, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, Mrs. Morales.
I moved to adjourn.
Thank you.
No, you seconded. I did
I
it.
second, okay, I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Shelton, second by Ms. Morales to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Nay? The ayes have it. We stand adjourned at 6:33.
Have
a nice Thank you.
evening, you guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Morales.
He might have.